Fraud is everywhere in the news today. California has just taken the bold move of passing an anti Nick Shirley law, which to anyone with two eyes, two ears, and a brain has to conclude that it's to chill free speech and silence journalists who might be looking at fraud. Well, Jonathan Deaver is a former member of the Ohio state legislature. He's not afraid to talk about fraud, and he joins us now on The Truth. Jonathan, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate you letting me be on today.
Of course. So how long were you in the Ohio legislature?
So I was there for 2 terms, so a total of 4 years. Became the chairman of the banking, which is what most folks call it, the Financial Institutions, Housing and Urban Development Committee in my first term. But before that, I had been active in state and federal politics since my days in college, so well over 30 years. So it kind of dates me. Top of my head dates me as well, but that's a different story.
So I guess you could sort of look at this as like, the human condition seems to always punish the messenger. In this case, we're talking about Nick Shirley. But that's true with whistleblowers we've seen that have come forward in a lot of different contexts, thinking that they were doing the right thing and would be rewarded for their truth, are actually punished. Many of them lose their jobs, or they're demoted, or they're otherwise penalized. I mean, what do you think about our culture and our society today, and what we see going on with the outgrowth of thousands of NGOs that completely lack accountability and appear to be the nexus of the fraud?
That's actually a very relevant question. Part of the problem that we have is the structural gap between the allocation of the idea, right, and the execution of the idea. So, I like to say that in a private enterprise and private business, right, what do? We make sure we have an operations officer who's in place, right? We make sure that we have a process and a procedure, and then we implement that process and procedure across the board in a meaningful and sound way, right, with accountability measures in place. So as an example, in North Carolina, the auditor of state was very, very efficient in finding out that we have a lot of folks that are supposed to be in the system working, but they're looking for these folks to the tune of $1 billion they're spending every year for monies that are to be allocated for wages and hours in terms of conditions of employment, right? And the money then goes from the General Assembly's fund into that respective department, and it just kind of gets washed and absorbed into the ecosystem there. So on its face, you have certain people calling it fraud, and then you have other people just calling it bureaucratic inefficiencies. But either way, it's still waste, right? But it's $1 billion in North Carolina, and this is documented from the auditor. So the auditor lays out a simple plan on, hey, this is your problem, and here's a couple of ways where you can solve it. Number one, if the job itself you're offering too little for the job, the marketplace say it's a $100,000 job and you're offering $30,000, then you probably need to figure out how to get to market rates to get the qualified person. Maybe you don't need the job, get rid of it, slash it, right? And then thirdly, maybe you need to look at a process now to make sure that there's a reporting mechanism when you're not filling it. And so the legislature then gets these recommendations, and then they get stuck in committee, and then they send it to a study committee. And before you know, the money is still being allocated. It's still being spent on miscellaneous items within that agency, because there's no incentive within these systems, operationally speaking, to right size or to find efficiencies. It just doesn't exist.
Well, your focus seems to be more on kind of a Doge style approach to auditing government, finding out where the waste is. My psyche is more focused right now on what I would think every American would consider to be the low-hanging fruit, which is just outright fraud. I mean, yes. I don't know that Stacey Abrams stole $1.98 billion. But what I do know is that she got a $2 billion grant and delivered a total of $98,000 in toaster ovens to people that were supposed to be the recipients of the money. And that leaves a big, huge chunk unaccounted for. Where is the accountability? Why are the regulators and whoever's job it is, like maybe the FBI, not down in Georgia auditing the books of her NGO.
And, that's a valid point. I mean, the USAID, as an example, right? They know that they've got problems, but they don't have a process to monitor something as simple as an overhead rate, right? So when a grant goes out, there's a certain amount of money that's needed to run it, if that makes sense. So most people understand it. You've got a business, you understand there's a certain amount of money that you've got to pay your employees, your staff, you have overhead, you've got the cost of production of your show, advertisers, those types of things. And there's no true way of monitoring those overhead rates. So sometimes it's outright fraud. Sometimes it's just lack of organization or even management. That's part of the big problem here. So there is definitive fraud in the system that they've earmarked, but that goes back to when the White House issued its fraud website. You've got one group of people saying that we've got 229 billion in fraud, another group saying, no, it's 189 billion. And they're arguing about what's fraud and what's mismanagement. My point is, hey, we're Americans. We're writing a check on interest on money that's compounded the tune of $3 trillion over 2 decades. That's sitting on our national debt that was just refinanced a week ago. We're paying higher interest rates than before because that was financed at 0 to 1%. Now it's getting financed higher. They've never paid it off. They've never dealt with the fraud or the mismanagement. And the fight now, it seems, online is whether we're going to call it fraud or mismanagement. My point has always been, whether it's fraud, mismanagement, or foolishness, it's a waste. And it's about 10% of our annual budgets, which is inexcusable. I can't imagine, if you're married, and I'm assuming you are, and you go home and you tell your wife that I've lost, 10% of my money to fraud and or mismanagement, I don't think she's going to be happy with you, let alone your investors in your corporation or anywhere else. So at the end of the day, I don't care what we want to call it. I just want to get it fixed. And we need to have processes in place to not only identify it, but hold everybody accountable to it.
I think that characterizing fraud or allowing it to be mischaracterized as mismanagement is understating the problem pretty severely. And it seems to be a means to let people off the hook. We don't throw mismanagers in prison. We do throw fraudsters in prison. So why are we not lining them up, investigating them, and throwing them in prison?
Excellent question, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think there needs to be a larger bit of accountability other than the identification process. Great, so we've identified 189 billion in fraud, let's say at the federal level. And okay, fine, the rest of it's mismanagement. If these two want to argue about that, that's great. At the end of the day, let's take the people who are engaged in fraud. There are criminal processes that they should be investigated like any other fraudster. If I defrauded a senior citizen or a neighbor or something like that, and as a lawyer in my prior life, I represented people who'd been defrauded. Not only did we seek to have their money reinstated, but we also sought criminal charges against the wrongdoers. That should definitively be part of the process. But again, that's part of the structural gap that's existing in state and federal government. Great, you've identified it. Okay, great. Now you have fraud, you have mismanagement. That lies at the feet of the agency or the administration that's managing it. The rest of it, we need to hold those people accountable. We're not doing that.
No, we're not. And it seems to me to be that there is a huge double standard at play in this country. Do you think we need the SAVE Act?
I think the SAVE Act has its place and it has a proper place and they should be passing it. But that's a different conversation for a different reason. It's fraud in a different form. My view on it is, you've got one side claims that it's de minimis fraud and the other side says, no, there's more. My view is I have a zero tolerance policy for fraud. And quite frankly, in elections where some of them are decided by a coin toss or a single vote, which in my state happens a lot. I'm sure it does in your state too. We had 36 races one year that were decided by a coin toss. So any fraud of any kind is wrong. It shouldn't happen. We should be making sure that we're rooting it out in every aspect of anything that our government does.
Do we pass a new law preventing members of Congress from trading in stocks?
Well, I think they're currently working on something like that. But the reality of it is, I think it'd be much easier if we just made Congress have to take the same benefits that we have to. So if we get Social Security, that's what they get. If we have to go to the Obamacare exchange for healthcare, that's what they need to be doing. Because quite frankly, there's skin in the game when you have to consume the product that you're selling to the average person.
Well, I guess the point that I'm trying to get to is this is just the world according to John. I don't really feel like I'm 100. Let me just make no ambiguity about it. I'm 100% in favor of passing the SAVE Act, and why John Thune is not brought to the floor of the United States Senate and made it a roll call vote and let senators rise, stand, and be counted on it. I don't know. I don't understand it. 85% of the American people are in favor of passing the SAVE Act. And he is one guy, along with, I guess, a small group of Republicans that are just flicking us all off. And that would bring into question their motives at that point. And then they're grandstanding about whether to pass a law preventing congressmen from trading in stock, publicly traded stocks. And I just got to tell you, I think both of these pieces of legislation are a farce. And I say that because the United States Constitution, in clear, unambiguous language, requires that in order to be able to vote, you have to be an American citizen. End of story. Period, paragraph. Hard stop. What's the issue here? We also have laws that have been documented and enforced with a lot of precedent that prevent insider trading. So I think it's asking too much for someone to leave their family and their home to go to Washington to serve the American people and then tell them that they can't have a nest egg and they can't invest. But certainly they should be held to the same standard that the rest of us are and not be allowed to trade on insider information. My point is the laws already exist to get us to the outcome we're trying to achieve. So my suspicion is that this is all just a disguise to make us feel better. But if they passed all of the above, nothing would change. They would still continue to break the laws. They would enable people to break the laws. There would be no accountability for breaking the laws. And so we'd really be very little better off than we are today.
Well, I don't disagree with you at all. Generally speaking, I mean, there's 3 requirements to vote, right? You have to be an American citizen, you have to be 18 years old, and you have to live where you say you live. It's not really complicated, right? I can't go vote in your state. I can't go out to California and vote. I can't go to Illinois to vote. I've got to vote right here where I live in Ohio. That's not rocket science. I'm over 18 and an American citizen. I got my passport. I was born in the United States. So it's not complicated. It's very, very easy. It's straightforward. When it comes to investing, you're right. The standards are the standards. They should apply to everyone. But it goes back to what we were talking about before. Unfortunately, we're really good at pointing things out. We're terrible at the application of basic things. When we can find fraud, we identify it, but we don't do anything about it. We talk about it, but we don't act on it. And that is part and parcel where, you know, I believe that we need more Josephs. If you're familiar with the story of Joseph of the Bible, right? Joseph worked for the Pharaoh of the time, and he knew that there were going to be hard times, and he was an able administrator, and he prepared for hard times. He saved and he invested of the currency of that era for the times when they were rough, and then they survived the storm. And we don't have administrators like that anymore, and our politicians seem to not be interested in that kind of governance.
Today's broadcast is brought to you in part by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. They're a restaurant services company in North Georgia. They will sanitize the front of the house, the back of the house, remove your waste vegetable oil, clean your grease trap, and your vent hoods. If you're tired of slow, inconsistent, unreliable, and dirty service from your provider, check out PCRenergy.com. They're in Atlanta, no automated attendance, and they'll give you a quick response. PCRenergy.com, where you get to speak to a live person, no automated attendance, and they give clean, good, reliable service, locally owned and operated in Atlanta. It's www.pcrenergy.com. It's delicious, it's nutritious, and best of all, no dishes. We're talking about Bogey's Beef Jerky, of course. Premium craft beef jerky that's taken off at the most prominent golf courses and resorts across America. Made for the turn, the road, or whenever you need a bold, protein-packed snack, Bogey's delivers the rich flavor and that premium chew every time. From smoky heat to Pineapple Express, try some Bogey's beef. They've got a flavor for every player. Bogey's Beef Jerky, tee it up, tear it up, and enjoy.
And just next to you in the state of Michigan, James O'Keefe exposed just 2 weeks ago that if you show up and you're registered to vote, you can vouch for as many as 8 people who you claim or live in the precinct, and that you will vouch for, whatever that means. I guess simply that they are who they say they are, but that doesn't get to citizenry. And you can actually register and vote on the spot on election day at the polls.
That is actually a unique and bizarre thing where you can just vouch for someone. Now, I'll give you an ancillary here, but the state of Wyoming.
Could go one further step and say that it's also highly illegal to register someone who is a non-citizen. He and his friends all dressed up in Middle East garb.
I saw that video.
They can vote.
Yeah, I saw that video.
Well, it pisses me off.
Yeah, and now I'll tell you, there's I agree with you 100%, but there is an interesting comparison, right? So there's a difference between a red state and a blue state. Now, there's a red state that allows you to register to vote and vote on the same day, but it's a little bit different, and it's the state of Wyoming. And what they do is if you show up with your passport, a copy of your driver's license, a mortgage statement, or a rental agreement that shows that you live where you say you live, with your passport and your driver's license, showing that you are, in fact, a resident of the state of Wyoming, and that driver's license address matches a mortgage or a lease, and you have your passport, they'll allow you to register to vote and vote on the same day. Totally different standard, very similar process from the standpoint of we want as many people to vote as we can. But in that state, it's a red state. They're making sure you're a citizen. They're making sure you're 18. They're making sure you live where you say you live. And they're not relying on somebody's personal vouch, which we know people, we want to give people the benefit of doubt, but we know that people can be dishonest. They're mostly dishonest when it comes to this in that regard. And that undercover story showed you how vulnerable that system is.
Yeah, and the people that are complaining about voter fraud, like Tina Peters, often become the victim. She spent 2 years in prison. She got a 9-year sentence for trying to expose what she believed to be voter fraud. She didn't even expose it. She just wanted to test to find out whether it had occurred. And they came down on her so hard. She had a lawful right to know. She was the registrar or the elections official in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Yep.
Have we lost our mind? Have we lost our way? Can we get the genie back in the bottle?
Well, I think part and parcel that comes back to something I like to talk about a lot is that, the root of all of this starts in the house. You have your family, your children. It's the values that you teach. It starts there. And if you don't have a good family structure, if you don't have good parents that are teaching these things, and if you're relying on these schools and you're relying on other people to raise your children, it's an inevitability. When I grew up as a kid in the 70s, I remember, you couldn't get away with very much, because even if it was my father or my mother, it was definitively the neighbor, the man next door with his kids that I was visiting. They were holding us accountable for everything that we did. We just don't have that today. And social media is making it worse, where people get into these little feedback loops with their own friends, and they can find anything that justifies their position, and it just reinforces what they want to believe. So the truth right now, especially in the era that we're in, I kind of like to call it the era of deception. It's so easy for you to find something that fits your narrative that's not based on truth, that it's kind of scary at this point. So I think it's incumbent upon families, fathers, mothers, to raise their children right. Stop letting the schools raise your kids and get us back to some basics, and then maybe we have a chance. The only thing I can tell you, though, is that the generation of my children, these teenage boys that I have, COVID really did kind of an interesting work in that generation. It made them distrust a lot of things. They're very skeptical, and they're asking a lot of questions, which is actually quite healthy, that they're actually thinking about things now.
Yeah, and a lot of young people are actually returning to the church, which I think may be the greatest source of optimism that we can find.
I agree 100%.
Well, Jonathan Deaver, he is a former Ohio State legislator. And Jonathan, we really appreciate your coming on The Truth Today and help us discuss this very troubling subject of fraud.
Well, no, I appreciate it. And if there's anybody who's interested in reading more, you can always go over to Substack and find me at Deaver Dialogue. I'll be writing about this until the book launch, but you can also sign up there for a copy.
So I encourage our listeners and audience to do just that. Substack, and give us the name of it again.
It's Deaver Dialogue. My last name, Dialogue. You can do a quick search. You'll find me right there.
There you go. Deaver Dialogue on Substack. And that is the truth. And I'm John Gordon. Thank you, Jonathan Deaver.
Thank you.